Hello everyone, welcome back to this session. In this session, we'll talk about the fee calculation. What are the various fees for calculated for mutual funds, hedge funds and private equity funds and how they are actually applied. So let's look at how the fee calculation is done and what are the different kinds of fees charged by these funds and how these fee calculations are calculated. Now to starting with, let's talk about the mutual funds. Now, mutual fund charges two kinds of fees. One, they charge something called as a management fees. A mutual fund charges management fees. Now, what is this management fees? The management fees is required charged by the mutual fund to cover all the expenses which are actually derived for running this day-to-day operations of the fund. It includes fund manager fee, transfer agent fee, custodian fees, etc. Now, how the management fee is actually charged by the mutual fund? The management fees charged as a percentage of AUM. Now, it is charged as a percentage of AUM. AUM is assets under management or the total value of the assets which is managed by the fund. Now, let's have a look at example. Example, we have a ABC mutual fund and this ABC mutual fund has total of 100 million as a AUM, means asset under management. Now, let's assume that the fund charges 2% of management fees. Now, this 2% is applied for the total of 100 million AUM. So, the 2% of 100 million is $2 million. So, the fund charges 2 million as the management fees. This is how the mutual fund charges the management fees. This in summer, to just summarize, the mutual fund charges the management fees and the management fees is applied as a percentage of AUM or assets under management. Now, let's talk about the hedge funds. When it comes to hedge fund charges two types of fees. One, they charge a management fee and also they charge the performance fees. Now, management fees charged by the hedge funds are very similar to how it is charged by the mutual funds. So, management fees is charged as a percentage of AUM. Now, continuing with the example, let's say we have XYZ hedge fund. This hedge fund has about like 300 million AUM, that is assets under management. Now, hedge fund, assume that hedge fund charges 2% of management fees. Now, this 2% is applied for 300 million. 2% of 300 million, that is equal to 6 million. So, a hedge fund will charge 6 million as of management fees, that is one fees. Second thing, the hedge funds also charge something called as a performance fees. Now, what is this performance fees? So, performance fees is charged on the return generated by the fund. So, this is charged on the return generated by the fund. Now, normally the performance fees varies from 10 to 20%. It varies from 10 to 20% of the return generated. Now, let's look at an example. Let's say we have XYZ hedge fund. Now, XYZ hedge fund has an opening of 300 million AUM. Let's assume that this 300 million is the opening capital. Now, the hedge funds after 1 year, let's say after 1 year, they generate the total value of the fund. The total of the value of the fund is now 360 million. So, they started with 300 million and they ended the year on 360 million. That means the total return generated by the fund is 360 minus 300 million, which is equal to 60 million. So, 60 million is the return generated. 60 million is the return generated by the hedge fund. Now, the performance fees is applied on this 60 million. Let's say 20% is the performance fees. 20% is the performance fees. So, 20% of 60 million. 20% of 60 million, that is 12 million is the performance fees which is charged by the hedge fund. So, most of the hedge funds follow 2 by 20 structure. Most of the hedge funds follow 2 by 20 structure. That means 2% of management fees and 20% of performance fees. So that is how the hedge funds charge two types of fees, management fees and performance fees. Another thing which I want to explain is when we talk about the performance fees can be with or without hurdle rate. It can be with or without hurdle rate. Now the example which we are talking about, right? The example we just spoken about is without hurdle rate. So the first mechanism where we discussed, right? It is without hurdle rate, means the fund do not consider any hurdle rate for while calculating performance fees. Now let's see one example. If the fund, let's say calculation of performance fees when hurdle rate is applied. So let's see example. Let's say for example we have XYZ hedge fund. Now XYZ hedge fund starts with a 300 million as a AUM. Now let's say for example a fund has a hurdle rate of 10%. So what do you mean by this hurdle rate is the fund have to generate minimum 10% return. Now let's say for example end of the year the fund value is 360 million. Now how the performance fees is calculated? Let's see. So what is the opening capital? 300 million. What is hurdle rate? 10%. So 10% of 300 million is 300 million is 30 million. So the fund have to generate minimum 330 million have to be generated. Minimum 330 million have to be generated. Now the fund have generated 360 million. That means total they have generated 30 million excess profit. 30 million is the excess profit which is generated by the fund over and above the hurdle rate. Now this 20% management fees, 20% of performance fees is applied on 30 million, not 60 million. So now it is like the performance fees in this case will be 6 million, that is 20% of 30 million. So that is how the performance fees is actually calculated. So in this session, we have seen how the various kinds of fees like management fees and performance fees are charged for mutual funds and hedge funds. Thanks for your time.